This podcast is in the blue. Don't worry about.
No, I know. I curse all the time on this. I am constantly dropping F-bombs.
No, I know you know this. I'm saying it to Diana. Right. No, you referred to Bill Murray as a twat last time.
Yeah.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Welcome to Another Pass podcast. I am Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by Sam Alisea.
Hello.
And today we are journeying into a weird space of internet fandom. It's going to be quite the conversation because today we are talking about Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure, the made-for-TV movie that has a lot of infamy, especially on a network that has a lot of Star Wars conversations going on. But to do that conversation about a weird Star Wars property, we are joined by Diana DeGarmo.
Hello. Ewok teddy bear fan in the house.
Agreed. I don't like the Ewok slander.
Diana, thank you so much for coming on. Now, this is, I think, the first time I'm actually chatting with you directly as opposed to just sort of like social media posting since we worked together on the Toxic Avenger musical.
I know that was just a couple years ago, right? Just a few. It feels like yesterday and also eons ago. But yeah, it's been so long.
Yeah, a long time. However, since the Toxic Avenger musical, which is now a goddamn decade out, you have done a lot of stuff. So do you want to give some quick plugs?
Oh, golly. Well, things were going swimmingly until, the spring of 2020. But lots of TV shows and other Broadway shows. I got married. I now live in Nashville, Tennessee with my husband, and we love living here. We've been here a little more than we would have expected over the last 17 months, but excited that our stages are reopening. And finally, we've gotten the chance to do a lot of fantastic virtual work, ironically, through all of this, which we would never have ever expected prior to 2020. So that's been a pleasant surprise. And now I'm itching and ready to get back up on stage, like so many other performers.
Right. It's great watching all my theater friends who, as things are sort of reopening and then kind of shifting back into gear, like being like, oh, right, I have to go to an audition, or, oh, right, like we're starting to plan out like a production, and like, oh, how's the weather going to be for this like outdoor like stage production? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have to think about those things again after being used to just, yeah, we're going to do a Zoom call. It's good.
Yeah. Planning flights, like actually having a schedule.
So it is really nice though that technology has gotten to the point where we can keep working even when we have these kind of like world reshaping kind of things. But it's also very nice that people are starting to get vaccinated and that we can kind of go back outside and like hang out and see people.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm okay with not seeing people. But I'm also an introvert. So I'm like, see people. What am I going to use as an excuse now? Oh, God.
I like to see my people and I like to pay my bills. So like, a little bit
That's fair.
That helps. Fair. But I have not minded being home because, the year prior to this, my husband and I were home a whopping 24 days out of the entire year of 2019.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
And so to go from that to we have not gone anywhere except just recently we went on a trip for a vacation. That's the first time for our wedding. And that's the first time we've left our house since March of 2020. So that felt good. And hopefully the next trip will be out for a contract going to St. Louis. Woohoo!
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is this something you can talk about or
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny because Equity had not said it. They had not cleared the contract up until about 10 days ago. So, we had a little bit of question of whether or not it was actually going to go through. But I'll be doing always Patsy Cline in St. Louis at St. Louis Stages.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm excited to go out there and hang out, sing my idols music for 9 weeks, and then see where life takes me from there.
That's awesome. I mean, make sure to send us the info for what to link to so we can put it in the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, because that's fantastic. It's always nice to get back out there after being away and seeing your friends, like old friends, like perhaps Wicket of the Ewoks.
Oh, Wicket.
Wicket is the best. I will take no Wicket slander.
So this is a weird movie to talk about in general because it's just like a little backstory for those not familiar with the podcast network. It's called Certain Point of View as a Star Wars reference. And it started off because it was a Star Wars show that one of the most contentious debates between the hosts was about the virtue and value of the Ewoks. And it's fun for us to have this chat now because I ended up really liking this movie.
Yay!
It is. It's so huggable and squeezable and cheery and heartfelt. And it starts off as this, it feels more like a fairy tale to me than like really like science fiction. But jumping in and seeing getting to really live on Endor and be there, because usually you just kind of jump in and jump out. You don't get to spend time there, but to see the Ewok world and how they've come together, it's so sweet. There are some choices made that were questionable. Our leading man, Mace, which, by the way, Case, my husband's name is Ace, character's name is Mace. We were watching the show or watching the movie laughing, just going, well, how many more aces do we need in this case right now? But
we'll throw in a chase and a brace somehow.
There we go. Yeah. He makes some, I don't know if he made those choices or if the director made some choices for him, but he was coached in a very interesting way. And when you start to see...
Yeah, Mace made some face.
He did. All the faces.
Mace was a jerk. He was a jerk.
Yes.
Let's not, okay, I don't know if it was script. I don't know if it was the acting. He was a young kid. So, we're not going to take that away from Eric. But I will say, Mace was a jerk.
He's so mean to the Ewoks, like from the moment right out of the gate. He's just, at first you get it. Maybe he's scared. Okay, I can go with that. But then it just never lets up. And then you start to see where they have clearly edited in some nice moments because all of a sudden he's like, oh, you're my best friend. You're like, wait, hold on. Where did that come from? There was no lead up to it. And then, at the end of the next moment, we have, but I really like you. Thank you. After he's just, yelled at them for the last 10 minutes.
Right.
All right, editing.
he also, at some point, because, when they have to get their caravan, they've got two other people that they've got to kind of bring on. And the second Ewok, who is going to take the crystal, which has magic powers, he, totally dismisses their powers, because it turns it into, a little lizard. And he's like, it's just a lizard. And I'm like, bro, you couldn't turn it into a lizard. Why are you judging? You're such an ass.
Right. Actual magic was just done in front of you.
What?
And then he takes his stone and just throws it away. But sweet little Wicket.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for Wicket, because Wicket saves the day again and again.
Again, I will not tolerate Wicket slander of anyone slandering him. I will not tolerate it. Saying this to the rest of the people on our network.
Yeah. I have a special fondness for Wicket. When I was a kid, when all of us were young and the Sci-Fi Channel first came out, they were obviously thirsty for content that they could afford. And so they would air the Ewok cartoon. Being a young Star Wars fan, I watched that all the time because it was it's more Star Wars stuff. I love Star Wars stuff. And it's a silly cartoon, but
I have it on DVD.
Yeah.
I also have this movie and the second movie on DVD.
She's going down. She's going down with that ship no matter what.
I am dying on this hill, guys. Not about the second movie. I will say the second movie probably needs more work, but I am dying on the hill. I like this movie. I like Ewoks. I'm fine with them. I am dying on this hill.
But it's just so much their own entity, though. So for me, coming from wanting it to be somewhere, what's its connection with the rest of the galaxy? I don't know. We don't get any backstory as to why the parents are on Endor. We don't other than just we crashed. Oh, yeah. Okay. But they could have just done script wise, maybe I'll save that for later. But
yeah, I mean, for the pitches, I think it was a mistake to divorce it from the greater Star Wars lore. I think particularly because when you're bringing back Warwick Davis to be the main Ewok from the movie that you're coming off of, and there's no Star Wars logo in this. It's not a Star Wars story. It's not a Star Wars tale or whatever the branding is now for Rogue One and Solo and all those. It's just an Ewok adventure. which is supposed to mean something to people who haven't seen Return of the Jedi. I mean, even to call it an Ewok adventure, where I don't think they're ever called Ewoks actually in the script of Jedi.
No, we don't hear Ewok ever. And not even here. I even thought I was like, okay, come on. No, okay, all right.
Yeah. I mean,
we just
on the
have
one
to
hand,
guess that.
that's the power of the branding, that like people, like Star Wars is just so popular that like you could just be like, oh yeah, here's a random thing from this world that they never actually say the word, and we all just know. Like we all just know it's part of the Star Wars canon. Like,
all right, I'll give credit where credit's due. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
My favorite fact about this movie is that George Lucas was so upset about the Star Wars holiday special that he decided to retake control over the properties for anything future being made for television. So this is a story that he specifically signed off on and hired someone to flesh out with his oversight because he was so upset about the Star Wars holiday special. I love it. I love that he did that.
Speaking of fleshed out, this is a 97-minute movie, and apparently the original draft was like substantially shorter, like more like an hour. So speaking of George Lucas padding out the script, originally my understanding this piece was supposed to be closer to the ballpark of like 60-ish minutes in terms of its runtime, and that because it was a TV movie, for it to be distributed, they needed it to fit into a 2-hour block when padded with advertising. So it is ballooned to 97 minutes in terms of its actual runtime, which kind of explains a lot of my problem with it, which is that the first half of the movie is way too slow and takes forever to get started. And then once it actually gets started, it's like, oh, okay, this is good. So it's just kind of a crazy kind of animal with it all, because like you end up kind of just sort of meandering around for a little while before we get like everyone to sort of meet each other, and then like it's a little bit longer before it's like, oh wait, we should actually go do the thing that we said we're going to do, and then eventually it's like, all right, now we're going to start the quest, and then the quest starts, and then like everything's good. Like, you know, you fight a big like pig dog thing, and then you fight a giant, and you do all that stuff, and it's great.
You bond and then you move on.
Right. You know? Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have to admit, I tried watching this the first 2 times and fell asleep before I made it halfway through. I tried. I really did. I was in it. I was like invested. I had my popcorn. I'm ready to go, you know. And then I tried it not once, but twice. I guess that shows I'm an old lady. I just can't watch movies after 9 p.m. anymore. I don't know. But I rewatched it again during daylight hours. And that's where I finally, like you said, Case, I got to that hump point. I made it, and I could ride out the rest of the film and still loved it. You know, I enjoyed it. There again, I have my hangups, but I enjoyed it.
It's fun for the whole family. No, I have to say, like, the beginning of the film is very slow. I think like the first scene is pretty good. Like the parents looking around. Some of the lines are not amazing, but just in terms of writing and the things that the parents say in general. Although I get, you know, I did like the line that the mom was like, Mace, we're not mad at you. Because I'm like, yeah, after you meet Mace, you're like, yeah, his parents are probably mad at him a lot because he's a jerk. So, but I just think like in general, you're right. The film takes a little too long to kind of get to the mystical Ewoks house to define what the trip is going to be, to get to Ewok Rivendell and to get their orders as the Caravan instead of the Order of the Rings. Yes.
Yeah. But once it gets going, then it becomes like just a classic fantasy thing. They find their healer, they find their barbarian, and the party goes on. They fight some monsters, and then they take on a giant, and it works. And then they win with a gun. But you know, whatever. It's a good, solid, like just classic fantasy trope. And I kept thinking watching this was that this must be like the first draft of Willow.
Yeah, actually, the second movie, which we're not speaking about in general, but the second movie actually has lots of elements that definitely inspired Willow. In fact, the sorceress in the second movie does a thing where she like turns into a bird. That happens a lot in Willow. There's a lot of elements where like even the raid in the second movie, I know we're not talking about that movie, I'm so sorry, but even the raid in the second movie, that beginning raid is a lot like the raid of Willow's Village. So a lot of ideas that were presented in these two TV films actually end up in that epic fantasy adventure of Willow.
It all has to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that this is like Lucas having done like, all right, we did sci-fi stuff for so long and was like so bound to it with Star Wars for a while, is like ready to pivot to more. I've been reading a lot of like Joseph Campbell stuff, and I just want to talk about the fantasy tropes and all that kind of vibe that he had for the 80s. And he's starting to pivot here, and he's like making it work in Star Wars. And then, you know, just a little bit later, it's like, all right, well, we've got Warwick Davis, who is like such a amazing find as like a solid actor of that type. Like he's so perfect for those parts, like taking advantage of a disability and making it like a thing that can be a selling point for you as an actor is cool and respectable. And like you know, Willow was really interesting because like they got lots of little people to be in this world and created a whole set for it, and you know, did a classic kind of fantasy trope of like a community of smaller people. And they're doing that here with the Ewok pretense, but the Ewok pretense is a couple things that sort of keep it apart, and it makes it like a little bit weird because it's not a new setting. It's not a setting of magic and so forth. It's I mean, there is magic in Star Wars, but it's like a kind of a specific type of magic, and the Ewoks can't speak. Makes it a bit of a difficult thing for storytelling.
Yet they kind of do. Every now and then you'll get like a chug or a you did it.
Yeah.
In between the words, it's like a strange kind of minion talk, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. So you start to kind of figure out, you know, what the good is and things like that. But yes, for no voices, no translation, really, the storytelling is a little hard to hold on to until you kind of start to figure out those little patterns that kind of help you. Oh, and then, you know, Burl Ives jumps in to fill in gaps. Oh, right when you're starting to scratch your head, he goes, "Oh, guess what? That's what happened."
Yeah, let's talk about that one, because so the movie opens, and I noted the narration, but like didn't think too much of it, and the movie starts happening, and then like 5 minutes in, like the narrator comes in hard, and I was like shocked enough that I was like, "Wait a second, did I?" And I like rewound. And I was like, "Oh yeah, he was at the very top of the movie," and every single time he started talking, I was jarred away from it. I was like, "Oh yeah, all right, there's a narrator." Okay.
And it's, you know, he's the voice of the snowman. So it's some weird way it just didn't feel, I felt like I appreciated the narration to kind of help clarify things, but they always came either too soon or too late, like editing wise. And you're like, wait, oh, okay, there it is. And his voice just made me want to feel like I was watching a Christmas movie, which I guess this aired right before Christmas because it was November, I think, ish, end of year. So like, maybe that's what they were trying to go for, that family friendly, you know, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Ewoks kind of vibe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think like in general, like this speaks to kind of like some of the lazy world building of Star Wars in general, because like Ewok is actually a mixture of Kalmyk, which is a Mongolic language, and Tagalog, which is the Filipino language. So they actually could translate. They could have worked on an actual blend, because there are times in Return of the Jedi you actually hear words, and they are Tagalog song like words. They're like words that Filipinos say all the time, and this Mongolian language that like they're using actual words in our world. They just don't use it in any specific order, and they don't actually blend it well together. So this is like goes back to a little bit of like some of the general laziness. Like both of the languages were chosen just because the person who added it said that both of those languages sounded foreign to the human ear. So that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
And, yeah, so that's not cool. But the thing is that they did have kind of like this, there was actual language kind of used. So they could have used it a little cleaner if they wanted to. But I also will say that for the narration, like you could say, oh, well, like subtitles would have made it clearer, but this is for kids specifically. So they're not going to be able to read that. And they did use motion animation in here, so maybe the snowman was a tie to that.
Yes.
all the Rudolph and Snow Miser and Heat Miser, kind of a nod to them.
And, we don't give kids enough credit that that they can pick up on more of the emotional cues than I think most adults might even kind of pick up on in film. So it is a great film to also introduce young kids to the kind of Star Wars world, because it's just, you just kind of follow along this little family of Ewoks. And I can totally picture, young me absolutely being like, oh, no, I know exactly what's going on. I don't need a narrator. I have this. Mm-hmm. But, adult me is processing it, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I think also one of the reviewers said that although it worked for the kids in the front row, it didn't work for their parents or for him. He had no idea what was going on most of the time. And I feel like kids they don't really need a lot of language involved. Body language is enough for them, and things being cute and kind of moving around and very expressive. And Wicked is very expressive. I think the only thing that's kind of overall creepy now, so many years later, is how little the Ewoks' faces move.
Yeah.
The lower eyes, half, not at all.
Even their eyes, they don't really blink or anything. And so that, I think that's a little, as an adult watching this with nostalgic feelings, clearly, anyone listening to this is Sam has gone off the deep end. This is not a review you can trust from me, guys. I love this movie. But honestly, I feel that watching it, I was just oh my God, their faces really don't move. They're just kind of staring, just dead-eyed, glass-eyed, kind of staring out. But, other than that, and a little bit of a slow beginning, I loved it. Just cut maybe 10 minutes from the beginning and I'm good.
Yeah, just speed through some of those kind of moments where we have to slowly get our way to camp and figure out she's sick. Oh no, make her better. Well, we have to go get the medicine. Oh, Mace is putting his hand in something else again. Why does he like to touch everything? And then, gather your folks and let's go on an adventure. Let's go.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to imagine just a fan edit that just trims it down, that gets you to the good stuff faster, and then it's just a solid movie from there.
Would love to know the 60-minute version. I would love to know what they had, the meat and potatoes.
I'm curious. I have to imagine that all they did was add, so it's got to be just additional fluff points and maybe longer cuts on some of the things. But when we get to pitches, I'm going to have to sort of take it from the standpoint of the studio wants a 2-hour movie, so we'll have to play with that. Okay. But I am going to check the internet and see if there is a 60-minute cut of it somewhere. Because I feel there must be. There are so many fan edits of the Phantom Menace. There has to be one for Caravan of Courage, at least one. Not maybe Topher Grace didn't do it, but someone else did. But thinking about the narrator, and I'm going to sound like a broken record on this one for people who have been following the show, but it made me think about, so way back when, I used to rip all my DVDs so that I could watch them when I was commuting back and forth between New York and DC on bus rides. And one of the ones I did was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which I love. I think it's a great movie. Andy Serkis is great in it. The first half hour of the movie has no actual spoken dialogue. It's all sign language. And the DVD rip I had of it didn't bring the subtitles. And so when I was watching it, I was just watching all the apes doing sign language with each other for the first 30 minutes, barely vocalizing anything, barely even grunts. It's almost entirely body language. And I was enthralled at how well I could follow what was going on. And that was kind of amazing. Now, part of that is that they were very facially expressive creatures in it. So you could kind of follow that. So I don't know if you could do that here, 30 years before with completely flat faces that don't move in any way, shape, or form, but you could probably get some body language kind of going, and it's some, they're a little bit more verbal than the apes would be. You could probably do something with that. I feel I feel they didn't trust people enough.
Yeah, again, I think that they're making it for kids. I think that I know that kids pick up a lot on body language, but I think they just want to make sure that things are clear so that they get kids of all ages. This movie is definitely not made for the adult Star Wars audience. This is introduction to a Star Wars creature. The Ewoks were placed into the movies for kids anyway. So like this like literally is like not just like a money grab, although yeah, it's probably a little bit of a money grab for more toy making, but it is like literally like, okay, we've got this thing that was just for kids. Let's make more of this just for kids. And I will argue that Star Wars has no science in it at all. And it is completely a fairy tale. And it has always been a fairy tale. And people misname it sci-fi because they're spaceships, but there's no science. There's none of it. It's a fairy tale. So this fits right into the world for me, like completely. This is just another type of fairy tale with creatures that are in the world. It gets a little confusing when you watch the second movie because the invaders, you don't know if they're from another planet or not. And it seems like the Ewoks are pretty like isolated. So like, I'm not sure if this is like before Jedi or even before like the Empire gets there to kind of just like make a base on Endor. You know what I mean? Like, what's the timeline of this family landing here? I don't know how that fits into the universe. I assume that it's way before because it seems like the Ewoks first time ever meeting anyone not like them on this planet. So the Empire hasn't even come to build a base. That's what I'm assuming here. But even though it doesn't fit anywhere chronologically, it's just fun. It's just fun for kids. This is specifically a fairy tale for kids involving the cutest, well, second cutest creature in the Star Wars universe.
Hear, hear. Yes, Sam.
Yeah. Your Star Wars is a fairy tale, people. Live with it. Accept it. Okay? There's a prince. There's a princess. There's a dark prince. And all of the science is not explained. Midichlorians do not exist. That's fucking ridiculous.
It's space wizards. Come on now.
It's space wizards.
Space wizards.
Yeah, I do think that this movie, though, missed the opportunity to do what Star Wars actually has going for it in terms of a uniqueness of setting, in that it is a fusion of faux science fiction stuff with the sort of supernatural kind of elements. Like the Star Wars in general, it's like, yeah, we can have people who can shoot lightning from their fingertips and also a laser gun. And those two things can work together in kind of a fun way. Like it allows you to do a type of fantasy setting that is like a Match-Attack kind of scenario where, there's like everyone has access to like floating carts and cities where elevators are flying discs instead of physical things. Like you can do the same kinds of stories in a Star Wars setting. And you can also do all the cool magic stuff because the Force is vague and ill-defined and has, lots of powers that we don't really understand. It would be kind of fun if they had tied some of that in. And I have a lot of it's weird. This movie comes out 1 year after Return of the Jedi, and it kind of doesn't necessarily happen anywhere in relation to those. Canon has later, or I shouldn't say canon because it's who knows what's canon anymore. But novels wrote in Cinda later on and established that all of this happened before Return of the Jedi. But when this movie came out, there's no reason for any audience to think it's before Return of the Jedi. It comes out 1 year later. It features a character who is in it. It very easily could be a sequel. We don't actually get that much. Wicket starts speaking some words by the end, but there's no reason to think that he didn't necessarily interact with someone before. And maybe that's why they were cool when they saw human children. They're like, oh, it's a little one of those things that we saw before. This all could be right after Return of the Jedi. It could be kind of fun to mix in some of those things.
I think the other thing that throws it all off is that he is fluent in English in the second film. And it's really not that much later. Wicket is speaking in complete English sentences to Sindel. Partially because I think they were just let's cut the narrator. Timeline wise, it ruins things too, because as I was saying before, you could say oh, this could be before anyone's actually gotten on planet, and even before the Empire has built their base. But then Wicket would be able to just talk to Leia when she got there.
Right.
So it this whole back to the Mongolic Filipino language, lazy world building in general for your fantasy fairy tale series.
Yeah, I mean, when we get into pitches, I kind of like, I don't mind the impulse to be like, Wicket should pick up some English and be a bit of a translator. I think that this should be a sequel to Return of the Jedi, where people are on the planet and like Wicket can act as a go-between, speaking a little bit of English. I think that would be a perfectly appropriate fantasy setting kind of trope. Like, we can roll with that, like, and then we don't need the narrator.
Yeah.
I think the narrator is a bad choice.
Yeah, he definitely takes you out of things real easily. Frosty the Snow.
I know we've harped on Mace a little bit, but I do want to bring up a couple things that I dislike about Mace that we haven't actually mentioned yet, outside of him being a terrible human being.
Well, he is a child. Let's maybe.
I know. And
I've called him a jerk a couple times, so I feel bad.
Star Wars has way too much of a history of the actors getting blamed for the things that are going on with characters that fans don't like. I like that kind of toxic fandom is a problem, and I'm not trying to perpetuate any of that here. That
said, thank you, Case. Thank you. From an actor standpoint, thank you.
I mean, that is all patently ridiculous. If you don't like a character, don't blame the actor. Like,
yeah.
Like the issue is not the child actor. The issue right now I have is the writing and then some casting choices going on here. But the casting choice isn't anything to do with him as a person. It's that they chose someone who looks like a dime store version of Mark Hamill.
Yes, it's so creepy. The whole time I'm like, do we have a secret child we don't know about?
He's too close. He's too close. They cast a person who looks so goddamn similar.
And they I feel like he was directed probably a certain way as well. And because that is their job at the end of the day. It's like, get what you need. And he's so angry the whole time. I'm always like, why is Luke Skywalker so mad? Like,
right. And because he has the same kind of whine that Luke had in the earlier movies, like in the first two. And he's wearing a flight suit that looks just like the flight suit that Luke wore. It's like it's very clear that they're trying to be like, this is your like Star Wars equivalent character. And I find it frustrating from the standpoint of, this is the spot I think that they tried to insert, like, oh, if you like Star Wars, this is that type of character here. It has nothing to do with the actor. It's just like a choice for a character that is
fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I think they also, with both of the casting choices, both children were trying to evoke different things. So with him, it was Luke. And with her, it was Drew Barrymore from E.T.
Ding, 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 ding. You can't get Drew Barrymore, get her.
Like, they were like, oh, tiny, blonde, kind of cherub looking, like little child who's going to be very trusting of like the creature. And she's going to connect right away. And that was very like an E.T. thing, which had just come out like a couple years before, right? Like 1982. And like, so I felt like they were trying to hit all of their bases with these two choices.
Yeah, the film as a whole, as much as I do love that it can stand on its own and it has its lovers out there, Samantha. But it does feel, I think if like it's all just throwing putty at like mud at the wall, being like, does this stick? Can we sell this? Like what other go to for film or money, cash cow, can we make out of this film? They were just like squeezing it because it clearly seems like it had good purpose in the beginning, and then they took the 60-minute and they had to cram in 37 more minutes, and it took a life of its own.
Yeah. And like, this is early in when in the rise of like toys being the big push for some of this material. Like, Star Wars famously is like one of the tipping points in terms of merch becoming like the reason why you make the property. And the 80s is known for all the cartoons and so forth that are like, we greenlit this to sell the toys that we were already going to sell. So I'm surprised looking at it that there aren't more toyetic components. Like, there aren't more things going on that they could sell to kids. Like, you would think, like, have a few, like, you would think you could go to like who was the original Star Wars toys, like Kenner or Mattel?
I think it was Kenner.
Yeah, I think it was Kenner.
You're right.
Like, go to them and be like, hey, we want a big monster for this action sequence. Can we sell a toy of it? And like, just roll with those kind of things. Because like the world that they're in is very clearly like they're shooting out by like the redwoods, and they're like trying to get like, okay, here's a big forest to like film in, and there are moments
looks like my backyard.
a little bit, and there's spots that are like they do some cool stuff with, like where they're in the like patch with all the like the really high up root structure, but there are some spots where it's just like, okay, that's a llama and that's a pony, and there's like literally no change that you're making to it. Some of these don't even fit the biome that you're in. Like, some of those should be out on the plains. Like, you're not in the right spot.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed that they did that was pretty good, or maybe not pretty good, because it wasn't actually like that effective, but I thought was at least a good effort that they did, was that they put fur on all the chickens that were walking around. Like if you look at their feet, they're like, they're like in like fursuits walking around and like pecking about. And it's like, okay, well, that's at least like kind of cute that you're trying to make them look alien. Maybe you could have done that to the other animals that you have in the forest here.
When I was looking at that, I was like imagining what person had to go around sticking fur to chickens' feet.
What was your job today, chicken wrangler?
Yeah, like it was like being like, okay, like stay still, hold it.
Stop pecking me. Stop pecking me.
No, don't hold his neck that way. You might get up. I guess that's fair.
We only have 6 chickens now. We only have 6. Not one ran off. Sorry.
Like once we get into like some of the other things in the space that are special effects stuff, it's like, okay, those are all cool elements. And like the special effects in this movie, I was quite happy with in general, particularly I don't think they give it a name, but like the notes call it a boar wolf, this sort of like big carnivorous creature that attacks him in the middle of the movie. It's one of the last big stop motion things that ILM ever does. And yeah, it's made for TV, so like the actual movement's a little bit janky in much the way that the Rancor was a little bit janky in Jedi, like, but it looks really cool. And then the Gorax at the end, also like, yeah, it's a guy in a suit, but like the way they frame it, everything looks actually really good. Like all the new stuff that introduced is pretty good. Yeah.
And like even the little sprite, Evelina, was that her name?
Yeah.
Like I thoroughly enjoyed that kind of, it kind of felt like a little Art Deco kind of
I forgot that Tinkerbell was in this.
Right.
You're right. They threw everything in this because basically Evelina is Tinkerbell. That's who she is. She's got just about as much attitude as Tinkerbell and attaches to Luke Jr. and like he's Peter Pan. So yeah.
And they create this bond and somehow she helps save the day. Like, but yet we don't really ever figure out what she is or how does he know her name? Just, okay, Evelina, great, let's go for it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I feel llamas and ponies, they should have at least like dyed them a color or something, like just to make it like a little more alien.
Yeah, that was for me a couple parts. I was like, oh, well, all right, well, at least they shot it. They filmed it and they said, great, we captured it, moving on.
Yeah.
What are we doing next?
Yeah, all space llamas should be pink.
I second that.
I don't know why. Just randomly.
Just before we started recording this, I was on our friend's show, Saturday Morning Confidential, where I was talking about My Little Pony. So this is actually kind of, let's do My Little Llama and have blue llamas with pink highlights and so forth. And
I love it.
Yeah.
No problem.
Little like tramp stamps on their butts like you do with them.
They're called a cutie mark. Thank you.
Same difference. I've heard people call tramp stamps cutie marks too. So anyway, I've derailed the podcast. No, you're right though. Like the llamas, the other animals, like I was just like, oh, so this is just a horse. Okay, cool.
Yeah. At one point, there's just a weasel like in their house, and it's like, cool.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like it's just a weasel. Like you're not making a space weasel somehow. Like.
But then there's a space weasel in the tree, and that becomes a snake and eats Mace's arm. But his left hand is injured, not his right hand. But it ate his right hand. But how?
Yeah. There's some continuity issues.
Okay, all right, I'll go with it. But they gave us a space snake, so I'll take the giant space snake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, apparently space spiders' webs are not sticky because they're able to clearly climb across it without getting stuck to it and are just fine.
I'd have to check. I vaguely remember reading that real spider webs, not all the webbing is sticky. So maybe that's the pretense there.
Well,
learn something every day.
At all
don't call this learning. I'm like like when you said that, like I was like, wait, is it like they have certain types that's sticky and certain types that like structural? Don't quote me on this one. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't even that structurally sound. To be fair, because they only needed one hack to cut the whole thing down.
Right.
So to be fair,
easy breezy.
Spiders very bad at spidering.
Also, real spider silk, very hard to cut if proportionally sized. Like real spider webs are supposed to be as strong as steel. So yeah, you wouldn't just be able to hack through it. barbarian Ewok.
I'm just saying.
Also, why does it take the high priestess so long to use her crystal on the spider? I'm like, girl, we could have used that 10 minutes ago. Like, trance that spider and let everybody over first, and then you're taking your time.
Yeah, she did, but I think like she was still trying to figure out if she really wanted to be part of the group.
Well, it's a high level spell
was a
slot.
jerk
like
to her.
Do I want to keep Mace or do I not want to keep Mace?
Unfortunately, it wasn't him there. It was Chick Took, who was on the actual. He was still actually on the web, and he deserved saving. He deserved it all. He deserved everything. He is the hero. His last stand. He's the hero of this.
Let's talk about the back half of the movie, because like the first half definitely feels like stretched out and like they're fighting against their budget, and there's some production issues. Like not all the Ewoks like look that good. Some of them look like they just like had some carpet samples that they stitched together because they're trying to fill out like a whole roster here. But when we get to the back half, it is really solid. Like, how do you say it? Chuk Chuk. This barbarian who is almost as tall as Mace. He's like the biggest Ewok that we ever see. Who just is wielding an axe and just like fucking. We introduce him by him cutting down a tree, and then. Every time he like wrestles a horse down, he like is a bit of a bully, but then he makes a last stand against this giant thing by like breaking its toes to like keep its attention on him. Like it's amazing.
And honestly, I think his surly attitude really fits in with Luke Jr. or Mace. I should not confuse people. But with Mace, because like part of the reason he joins is that the two of them have like kind of an axe throwing competition and realize, oh, we're both jerks. And then there's all sorts of love and he joins their group. And it's kind of great. He's surly. He seems a little more sarcastic in his body language to a lot of things. I'm honestly like, if he could talk, he'd have all the one-liners in this film. I know he would.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, he would have the no one tosses a dwarf kind of moments all throughout.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%. Because he like probably like in Ewok was just like, go laddie, I've got this one at his final stand. And that's Mace actually feels bad when he does. And Mace is like a person in that moment.
A changed man. And then he receives the axe that takes the final blow. We come full circle.
It's really lovely, actually.
But not without, one more scare with the kitties, because, we have to have one more. Again, we're stretching it out a little bit more.
Yeah. Now we keep on saying that this is for kids and so forth, but this is also the era and honestly the people who are involved with things like Labyrinth and like Dark Crystal and so forth at around this time. Like I feel like this movie could have gotten away with like a little bit more scares, because like as it is, like we still have like one of the main characters dies and there's like plenty of terrifying monsters. Like the spider is pretty freaky looking. Like all of those things like look legitimately scary. We could probably have done, you probably could have just like assumed that like they're cool with like a little bit more if you wanted to like sneak in a little bit here or there.
Yeah, but I guess it's made for TV, so maybe that was also part of it. Like it wasn't like a theatrical release. I don't know. I think it's more like what they had in the budget for their practical and stop motion effects and like how many monsters they could afford to budget in. I really do think that like the bottom line came down to that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that honestly, I would not be surprised if you go to Kenner and like, I want to do a new monster and do another sequence like earlier in the movies, just to flesh out that part and say like, it's going to be cool and you're going to sell a ton of toys. You probably could have gotten a little bit of money for it. Like, I just don't think that they like were honestly thinking the way that studios would be thinking like 3 years later.
I feel like it was a fast turnaround. I feel like they just wanted to get something out onto TV. They probably already had the idea, somewhat solidified. And then they just threw what they could at it in like 6 months and said, great, we have a film. Here you go. And they didn't have a chance to kind of do all of that pre-production or real budgeting that you start to see with the lower or, later movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It is only 1 year after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
They're like, cash in now, people. Cash in. Give us a TV special. Lucas is like, okay.
And he was just like, you're not doing that Star Wars holiday special again. I will take this over. What? I only have like 7 months to do it. Fuck it. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, this is like an early outing once like Skywalker Ranch had been set up and like all that. Like I know Lucas all of a sudden actually had a production arm that he did not previously. I mean, he had it for Jedi too, but like he's definitely trying to like flex his like muscles in terms of like, look at all the things that we can create. Like, let's get them out there on all the things, movies, TV, probably not radio. I don't know.
Pew, 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 pew. Just on the
Well, but actually they did the Star Wars radio plays. So
yeah, they'd be fine.
Dominating everything.
Everything. Good.
But that said, like, all right, I've got like random notes about like, oh, this seems like a little wonky here or there, but like, there's nothing like, again, overall, I ended up like, once I got over the hump of the halfway mark being like, this is actually like shockingly fun once you're there. Like once you're into the actual story, that part's fun. Leading up to it, it was like, all right, well, it's just like, it's kind of slow and it's not really that exciting. But it also wasn't particularly offensive. So it doesn't like ruin it for me. I don't know. Do you have any other notes that we want to talk about before we like kind of get into pitches?
I just want to say really briefly that I don't, I don't want to disparage the parents, but I just don't feel like they were very good parents just based on the small interactions that they had. Not because they didn't miss their children, because they did, but when it was time to escape, they kept running and their son was left behind. So, and then they were like at the like precipice, couldn't cross, and they're like, "Oh no, where's Mace?" It's like, you left him in the cave with the monster and the one brave Ewok that decided to take the monster. You are really terrible parents, and I want you guys to know that. So, yeah, that's my only note. Just judging them in general based on what, like, less than 10 minutes of screen time. So, we can move on to pitches.
All right, so why don't we do that? But before we do, we should drop a plug for one of the other shows on our network.
Yes, we should.
Ads.
Before the Wicked Witch of the West and those gals from Salem, there was Circe, the captivating and kind of catastrophic Greek witch who did more than just turn men into pigs.
I'm Rose.
I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Gloria.
Join us this fall on Circling Circe, the podcast where we talk about Madeline Miller's incredible book, Circe.
We go through the novel chapter by chapter. We laugh, we cry from laughing. We swoon over Daedalus and other Greek hotties and talk way too much about food, life, and scented candles.
I'm hydrated. I'm ready.
You're
pumped
ready.
to talk about Greek gods and titans.
Let's do this.
Lasagna is not supposed to be cool. It's supposed to be eaten hot, stupid.
Who just looked at a cow and was like, hey, sexy, moo right over here. Like,
It's 11:45. I need to go eat my liver.
my Prometheus pate.
And Granny's like, get out!
We post every Wednesday, so mark your calendars
Make like Scylla.
Grab a sailor.
and dive in.
Find Circling Circe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Do we want to do an outro? Or
Yeah.
Is that your outro?
That's it.
All right, and we're back. So, who wants to go first in terms of thoughts about what could have been done to make this movie better? I generally have a standing rule that I'm not allowed to go before Sam. So since Diana is shaking her head that she doesn't want to go first, I'm going to say Sam's going first on this one.
Okay. So again, I love this film. And so part of me wants to be lazy and be like, it's fine. It's fine the way it is. But it's not. There's things that can change. And I think mostly what I would change is within the first half of the film. I feel like it's fine to kind of show the Ewok family dynamic, because I think that that's what like the first scene is trying to show you, where like Father Ewok is going out to find his children that are like on a rock, but it doesn't really fit the rest of the film, and it feels more like a documentary, like if it's like a different part of the movie, right? So it's just like, here you see a Father Ewok looking for his children. They have gotten trapped somewhere. We're going to follow the Ewok. So it's just really weird. It's National Geographic all of a sudden, but
Right.
with Ewoks, which, by the way, I would totally watch that. I would be fine with that if that was the movie and it was like an hour long of like watching the rural Ewoks of Endor. I would totally love that. But that's not what this film is. So I would totally change that, because it's very strange. And I think instead, I would still do the first moment with the parents looking for the kids. I would change some of the lines because they're really weird. Like, they're like, are you still in the cabin? Did you stay in the ship like we told you to? Why did you leave? Like, who are you talking to? What are these lines? I don't understand. So I would kind of maybe even for funsies, show the actual crash. If I had the budget, I don't know if I have the budget, but I would show the actual crash and then show the kids get separated from their parents, because I think that's more dynamic. And also that brings that space element that we're so used to in Star Wars, because right now we just have like a transportation pod, like just on the ground. We don't have anything else. So I would show the ship crash. I'd maybe even do an adorable shot of an Ewok seeing something through the sky, because they're cute and that's a very normal shot. And have them as a family go out to look through that crash and only encounter the children. They can still nurse the Sindel back to health because she's crashed and she's not feeling well. Mace can still be a little standoffish because he's on a planet and this was not their trajected planet. But he can come to trust them. And then when the children are better, they can set out to actually find their parents and figure out where that is. And that's how I would fix it. I would just fix that whole beginning part and like make it less like Ewoks of the Endor Forest, National Geographics, and more like, oh, wow, we're Ewoks and we just saw like a spaceship crash. Let's go check out what that is because something fell through our sky and this is our planet, and have them be kind of like adorable little rescuers. So that's what I would change.
Can I tag in? Because that's almost identical to my notes.
Really?
Ding, ding, ding. I know. I'm right there with you. Like, I was like, well, we're all clearly on the same page.
Here's my actual notes. Like, so like the things we're working against is the budget and we're working against the time. So like, we know that they need to pad it. So we need to like, if we're cutting stuff, we have to like fill up the space and we have to justify anything that we're putting in there. So assuming you're not getting money for merchandise stuff, which I know I was pushing that during the first half, I don't think that that's like a foregone conclusion. So I'm not going with it. So my thought is open the movie with a shot of Endor, which you definitely have on file already from Return of the Jedi. Pan up and insert a stock shot of a shuttle flying. And when I say a stock shot, I mean all of those ILM special effects of just like the back of a ship with like the like 3 engine lights going, like, or like the 3 engine, or rather like the 3 exhaust spots. Like, we're not talking about complicated shots. And then you have audio that indicates an alarm, and you have the parents saying, we're going down. And then you cut to the sky and you see what looks like some sort of meteor type thing going on. Yeah, like the ship crashing. So we're not talking about expensive shots here. We're talking about footage that they probably already have on file for both of those things.
Yeah.
Because it's different compositing to do the ship. But like, I mean, we're gearing up to talk about Superman 4 and Man of Steel, and like they have the same shot of Chris Reeve flying and like 30 times in the movie. Like,
reduce, reuse, recycle. If it ain't broke, why fix it though? If it tells the story,
exactly.
Use it.
ILM was one of the groundbreaking studios in terms of like using blue screen and specifically in using it for like all their model work for all the flying stuff. So they have all this footage. We're not talking about anything new.
Exactly. And you can still have at night. You can still do the shot with the original monster. I mean, like, I was actually thinking you could even leave that for like the end and just have like the legs kind of coming down and like kind of the ominous, like, oh no, there's a big monster above parents. Like, not do that shot and just kind of know that they're gone the next morning when the Ewoks come and just find the kids. But like, honestly, if you shot that thing, you could leave it in. Like, the parents being separated from the kids and the kids being unconscious and found by the Ewoks the next day, that still works. Like,
yeah. So like, my thought is like, all right, so we see the ship coming into the atmosphere, and you know, like I said, you can just take like a composite of like some sort of meteor type thing or a ship. Like I'm sure they have that. All you like, it's a white line in the skyline. Like, we're not talking about like a complex animation here, maybe with some fire effects or some smoke. And you pan down to see that Wicket is the one who sees it, and he tries to like indicate to his parents like, hey, there's a thing, and they ignore him and they want to go about their business. And what my thoughts are is to tie this into Return of the Jedi more, just so that we can justify a few things, because I don't want to have the narrator. We set them up as like going about their day, and like I think there should be like wreckage of the Death Star, and like But I don't mean like big set piece kind of stuff. I mean, like there should just be like a few like flats that are painted to look like broken shards of metal. And then like whatever random fucking props that they want to like have in like piles, like junk piles that the Ewoks are kind of going through and like trying to figure out what there are. Like maybe like a thing that is clearly part of a computer they're using as a knife, like whatever to sort of sell that they're like salvaging things. And again, shouldn't be expensive. We're only talking about them taking all the like the random crap that they already have and just putting them in a pile on like a fake wooden table, like for like people to be like working with like some sort of fake market. Because the other thing is they couldn't really use the Ewok village because that was expensive to use. Like that set was really expensive and not. I don't think they had full access to it at that point. Like part of it had been torn down. Like you don't see a lot of it in it. Like there's a few shots where you like look up at people in tree houses, which are mostly compositing. You don't have them moving around in this like intricate set that was from Return of the Jedi. So this justifies them being in a different location because this is like now like this little like weird makeshift thing that's sort of worked up about it. And you know, we can kind of see this sort of like world where they have like little things that they don't fully understand, but like maybe they're trying to use like computer devices and so forth, so that we can sort of set up like a world of magic and science in this fantasy setting. So it probably won't play much into this one, but this way it's like part of this world. And again, timeline set it as being like after Return of the Jedi. When they come home, Wicket is making gestures and sort of making like a flying sound and moving his hand, woo, Star Destroyer, like that, or Starship kind of thing. And what I think is they should do is after this whole bit, he like brings his hand and like in front of a fire, and that's where it should fade to a fire of the wreckage of the ship. And the parents are out there looking for the kid. So like the ship in the movie that we got is like fairly well together. I think you should have like some trees down around it. I think you should have some like random debris and like some fires lit. And the parents are like frantically looking for the kids because we're just picking up right after the crash instead of like they've been down for a while. So like the parents are looking around, basically the same scene with the Gorax. Like he shows up, and that's when you can cut to your first commercial. So when you come back, we have Wicket being the one to prep the hang glider because he wants to go look. And again, there shouldn't be any dialogue from the Ewoks at this point, and we shouldn't have the narrator. So we got to keep it kind of short and kind of like very clear what's going on. So like the parents should be trying to indicate, no, that's when he takes off, and maybe like maybe his dad or maybe his two brothers, whatever. We can have like a bit of an action scene of them trying to keep up with Wicket, who is hang gliding over everything. And we can have a matte painting of like the forest of Endor, and we can show like a downed ATST at some spot. We can maybe fly over the shield generator base from Return of the Jedi. Again, all of this is just like a painting that we're putting a little like hang glider over. Like the I know how to do this animation myself. Like this part would be very easy to put together. So you do that, and like Wicket is traveling, and his siblings are chasing after him. And this can be like our action beat for this section right here. That kind of pads it out. We can have them just running through the forest, like parkouring around, and they lose sight of Wicket. And that's when Wicket touches down when he sort of sees where the ship is. And goes to investigate. When he goes to the ship, he is alone. He finds the kids. It sort of plays out the same way with Mace like firing off a gun to sort of scare them. The gunshot is what causes the siblings to like realize where the base or like where Wicket is, and like to run to that. Plays out kind of the same way. When they're coming up, Wicket surprises Mace by saying like something in common, like spaceship or whatever, like some word, and like he's surprised, and that's when like one of the brothers like smacks him over the head with a stick to take him out. And like they like Sindel's like they we'll get a little bit of like the play that happens where like Sindel's like, no, don't hurt him, he was trying to be nice, etc. Sindel trying to be like nice to them and have that relationship. And she's like says to Wicket like we lost our parents, can you help us find us? Cut to commercial. Come back. They're hauling Mace back to their village. Sindel is walking with them. Sindel's trying to explain to Wicket everything. Wicket then is translating to the family. So we have him have a little bit of common, having spent time with Luke, Leia, etc. And maybe in their hut they should have like a little statue of C-3PO.
That'd be great.
Like, I mean, even if you want to set it beforehand, they should have a little statue of C-3PO just to like really hammer that one home.
That'd be amazing. Maybe like maybe in every home, maybe just in the background everywhere, just tiny little C-3PO.
Little idols.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we get like kind of a scene in like their hut where Wicket is acting as translator between them, and we can kind of establish how much English Wicket speaks at this point. Like it shouldn't be much, but it should be like it can make broken translations of things, so that like in a certain regard, Sindel starts to act as a bit of the narrator for us, where she has to explain to him things that he then has to convey to everyone else, so she can give the full story of the crash here. And if you have the budget, you can show some footage of it, but we already saw like the just enough at the very beginning. So we can, set up some of the time, place, etc. Take it to the seer pretty much immediately at this point. And I feel like that we should just sort of emphasize the seer as being like force sensitive. Like maybe you could do some effect to sort of convey like more of a meditation kind of thing. And if you had to, maybe auguring something, which is kind of fun for fantasy purposes, but like indicate that like the force is causing it to move into the shape that it needs to be. Whatever. Maybe using some tech stuff, because there's, again, there's tech stuff, so you could have like a little radar display or like a map is projected or something. Maybe not like a hologram, but like on a screen, so it's not super expensive. Would be kind of fun. But like again, I think like make it. I mean, it is magic, but it's like it's the force. Like a lot of the stuff could be sort of explained that way, and keep it feeling like it's all part of the same franchise, even if we're really doubling down on the fantasy story. Like somehow Guardians of the Galaxy is in the same setting as Captain America, and it kind of works. Like we just need to have that level of like they're really far apart, but we've seen these people before. The things that they're doing, no one has not seen in this world. Like we're at least aware that like, yeah, it's like they have a seer who seems to be able to commune with spirits. Maybe if you really wanted to, like I was about to suggest a Force Ghost Ewok. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that one back.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. But you could use something a little more tribal and still make it, or like traditionally known, like how like culturally people used to read like rune stones and things like that. You could have him like read stones or that thing, like, but use the force to lift them, and like you could see that kind of thing. So it still would go with their like, this is a tribe untouched by a lot of the modern world. Like they're still very like, living in their thing, but they're using this thing that everyone else uses, the force, whether they know the name of it or not, but they're using it with their own rituals. And this force power, like whether this Ewok knows or not that they actually are a force wielder, they've been using it as if this power helps them predict the future and see the future. So you could do something like that too.
Yeah. I joke that it should be the force changing if they augur a goat or something, how the blood trails go. I think the runes thing is better. What if they have like little, little stones that they've carved runes into, and what we can see is a stop motion, and this is a very easy stop motion thing of them moving around as she's like meditating or something, and it moves into a configuration that is Ewok runes. So the only thing this is a big change is that it establishes that they have a written language, but like it gives them Ewok runes that they then look and interpret and use that as the sort of focus of like setting up this quest.
I mean, you could also make it that it's not runes, but like hieroglyphics-esque kind of thing. So like images. Still also a language, but you could make it a little more picture of, clearly a llama or
or horse. Don't forget the horses.
Because they have that, or a weasel.
Or ferret.
and somehow those help them understand what it means, like 7 of knives. 7 knives mean this. Well, 3 weasels mean that you have to go over the mountain.
So we have Ewok tarot and roll.
Ewok stone tarot that is controlled by a force wielder.
Yeah, and because I think that could be kind of fun. Like again, the stop motion would be pretty cheap to do. Like you could very easily like move things into position, and then like they're Ewoks. They're like, this one doesn't speak English, so it's just going to like interpret it as it needs to, and then convey it to Wicket, and then Wicket says, "We help you find family," and then that's like all we really need to know.
Yeah.
But then after that, like that's about the halfway part. I feel like, we put a little bit of action beats in there to sort of fill up some time that I think could be shot fairly cheaply. Like just a bunch of people in Ewok suits running through the forest isn't that expensive, but we can make it kind of dramatic as a like looking up, trying to keep sight of the hang glider that's flying, which is again, one shot that they blue screen of someone on the, like someone flying the hang glider. And then they just insert it in all the shots of like, every time there's like a little bit of a clearing of the trees, like you look up, it's blue sky. composite in the hang glider, and then like the Ewoks are still running. Oh, we gotta slide under a log. Oh, we gotta hop over a thing. Like, oh, there's a waterfall. Damn it, we lost Wicket. Like it would be dramatic. You don't need a lot of words, so you don't need to have to stress about like the narrator and so forth. We get the sense that it's a family member because we saw them all together, so we know that dynamic is all there. They tried to stop him from going. He like stubbornly like takes off. Like I think that fills some of the time that we need to fill, and it could be a prolonged action sequence. I realize that this still might be too long or like too stretched out, but at least there are like fun bits as opposed to just being like, what I can't even tell. I can't even
the
articulate
National
what
Geographic version
Right.
of Ewoks.
Yeah, at this point, I would take anything over the National Geographic Ewoks. As much as I do love it, it's so confusing when you start the film. You don't know where you are. I mean, you sort of know where you are, but we have no real context. So if we can get just those few images of the crash, so we understand and rewrite the script a little bit, or just maybe take a couple more seconds to think about what we want to say before we just write the first thing that comes to mind. I felt like a lot of the script was like, hey, just be mad. Oh, that's it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think the crazy thing about that first half of that script, though, it's kind of like it's almost as if the person wrote it as if you don't know who the Ewoks are. Like it assumes that you never watched Jedi. Like they're introducing you to this rural teddy bear creature that lives on a magical like planet, like somewhere in a galaxy far, far away. And I think like that's why it feels so weird, because then when you get to the second half, like you're in a different movie. Like it's not the same film. It starts off as if they're introducing you to these type of characters for the first time. And that's just kind of bananas because Jedi was so huge.
And even if you didn't know randomly who they were, with enough just proper storytelling, it'll happen on its own because they're so cute and cuddly. You want to pay attention. You want to figure out what they are. I love the idea of the family dynamic, like with seeing Wicket go down and see the crash. And I would rather watch that than just the kind of randomness that happens before we finally get to our group and go on our adventure.
Yeah, it also really more plays into my idea of who Wicket is. Like as a child, to me, he was just the most adventurous of the Ewoks, the most curious of the Ewoks. He was the one that was willing to go out on a limb and be friends with Princess Leia. And he wanted to smell and wear her helmet. And so to me, I just feel like he was the guy that was like, no, this one's cool. Yeah, we can roast to those other ones. I didn't say hi to them first. He's the extrovert of this Ewok group. Clearly, everyone else is like, why did you bring people home? We have to cook them now. And Wicket was like, no, let's make friends. So, I think Case's version honors that.
Yeah. And remove the narrator. I would rather, let's have Little Bit, and Wicket be the translators between the two. They tell our story and then we keep going. Because that first half, just you get so lost in who's on first, what's on second, where, and then by the time you figure it out, okay, now the movie begins. And I think if, also ironing out some of the tag-along Mongolian language, which just giving us a little bit more thought into that dialogue, so you can be a little more easily translatable just by yourself instead of having to have the narrator. And because I'm invested, you can't help but want to follow these little Ewoks. And yeah, the humans are fine, but we're really here for the Ewoks. I just want to see them go on an adventure.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And it's a fun little adventure. And we're all saying oh yeah, once you get to that second half, it's really fun. So I think we just need to make it exciting to get there, because if it has to be 2 hours, that first hour should still be a fun time.
Yeah. You feel that they are definitely just trying to stretch it out as long as they can. And then that's where the 60-minute movie kicks in.
Right.
The money's in the advertising.
It really is.
But yeah, so Diana, do you have any other takes you want to throw out there? Or if not, that's cool. I feel like we have a really solid one already.
You guys, you've hit all the nails on the head and expanded it even far beyond than what I could have even given you. So thank you for being amazing. But that I was on the exact same path. I'm like, just connect my worlds. Let me still get a little bit of that science so we see where we are. We're not just in a forest with a spacecraft. I would love a little bit more of the story of the parents too. as to why they're even close to Endor, what's going on with them. But other than that, you guys hit the nail right on the head. I want to see that movie, so let's do it.
Is it bad that I'm just like, nah, fuck the parents?
Well, we don't need to have the parents do the explanation, because we can have Sindel and Mace try to give the explanation to the Ewoks, and then like Mace could be like giving too many details that don't matter to the Ewoks at all.
I will say, for all of my parents' slander, I will say that at least the dad did help like trip what's his name? The
Gorax.
Gorax. I was gonna call him something totally different. And the mom did shoot him. So like they both did get their licks in the last battle on some level, even though the final blow was the axe from Mace's hand. But yeah, they did do something in the film. They just also didn't left their son behind. So judging them.
Yeah. Oh, I need to call out one line that like ultimately does actually matter. So at one point, Mace says, "Listen, as soon as I get my gun, like, and there's like this vibe of everything's fine. But you know what? At the end of the movie, that is like how they kind of win. So
thank heavens for the gun, with the weenie, laser, just the lazy laser. It almost makes it.
But, in general, his lines are just terrible.
Yeah, I definitely would have dressed Mace less in, like, he's in effectively a military flight suit, which I get that they're probably limited in terms of what costumes they have access to, but I feel like they could have made it less like just full on the flight suit, like maybe the pants and maybe a shirt, like a different kind of shirt.
Yeah, different color even.
I want to say this, like, in general, to anyone writing like an exploration space movie. No one should ever be wearing white to explore anything. It is not practical. And the parents were wearing white. Sindel was wearing white. I get it. Hoth is different. It was an ice planet. People had to wear white. Please, if you are writing something or you are costuming for anything that has exploration in it, do not have your main characters wear white. It doesn't make sense to me, and it should be dirtier. And it always bothers me throughout the film that the white is not dirtier than it should be. I won't even wear white because I ride the subway, and I'm only doing that for maybe an hour. Okay, guys? Do not put your characters in white unless it's something allegoric and they are not exploring. It's just a PSA from me. I'm good now.
Even like khaki, frankly, is too much. Like, make it some darker tones.
Light
seriously.
colors.
Like, I don't like. What are you doing? I don't understand all these space movies putting people in white. Don't do it. If they're touching down on planets that might be swamps, why would they wear white? It's not practical.
Yeah, Cinda looks a lot better in the second movie because she's got the same outfit, but they like put her in like fur wraps on top of that. And if they had. Like, look, if she touched down wearing like those clothes and then like she was cold and they like give her some extra layers or something, like that would have been solved that issue right there. And likewise with Mace, he could have been like, I'm cold, and they give him like a cool fur coat, like or something.
First of all, he would have been a baller in a good fur coat.
That's true.
What about a fur vest? A nice long fur vest?
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, like let him like show off the guns maybe, and like.
Well, he's got that one ripped sleeve. He wants to really show off that arm.
Yeah.
That could have been a good look instead of him just wearing again Luke's fucking flight suit from the first two movies.
Yeah, literally.
I think that they were too married to like Star Wars. Eventually became like a particular type of fandom to like their audiences. Like by the time we get to like the 90s and like Phantom Menace and so forth, like lightsaber fights and all that had become like so integral to like what people fantasized about Star Wars that I wonder if this is too early to know what people wanted, and they just wanted like they were like looking for whatever like costume detail would sell Star Wars to the audience. And I kind of just wish that they toned it down a little bit and like put other spots in there, like put random, like I said, just take all your random crap and like throw it on like some fake tables that look like Ewoks are like trying to figure out what this stuff is. Like you could have a cute scene of an Ewok looking at a thing, and like you're selling the Star Wars there. You don't need him to wear the literal same clothes as a character from the main movies.
Yeah.
So that's my secondary pitch, the costuming pitch.
Put statues everywhere of R2-D2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, maybe R2D2 could be the new cult that rises up. And like maybe there's like this whole thing about religious wars, like a little Ewok Martin Luther is like nailing to a door. Like
it's a secondary. That's why you're not in the big Ewok village. This is the secondary village that follows R2D2 completely.
Mm-hmm.
They separated, and that is where they're at. I mean,
they're living their own truth on their own.
Yes. Maybe that's why like going to see the Seers from the C-3PO camp, and there's like a little bit of like oh, it's the R2D2ers here. It's like
it causes some angst, gives us a little drama, but about how they're having to go there. Okay, I see where you're going, Case. I see where you're going.
Right.
They're
like, and Wicked's trying to explain it to everyone, being like, well, we've met the real God.
Our Lord and Savior, C-3PO. Excuse me, do you have time to talk about our Lord and Savior, C-3PO? His soul is as shiny as his exterior.
What's the Ewok version of a doorbell then? We got to have a doorbell moment. Ding dong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
2 coconuts come down.
Some R2D2 witnesses. This has been a blast talking about this movie. I hadn't seen it before we decided that we were going to look at it, and I'd only heard bad things, and then actually watching it, I'm like, oh, this was a lot of fun. So I'm very glad that Diana, you said that you were into Star Wars movies when we approached you about movies, and that was a triggering point for Sam to be like, let's talk about this.
I'm glad. Thank you so much for introducing me to this movie. I had heard of it, but it really is really fun. I by the third try, it was the charm. I could stay awake. It was daylight. And my husband and I loved it.
I will say to anyone who wants to see this, and judge for yourself. This is on Disney Plus, along with the second film, which is definitely not as good, but also has its own gems, like hidden gems. And Wicket can talk, so there is no narrator in that one. And you can really see the development of like what will become Willow in that, because Sindel is an orphaned child who is basically kind of the chosen one. And so I would say like, yeah, like you can always put them on in the background if you have Disney Plus, and sweep your floor, fold some laundry, like
keep your kid entertained for a few hours. Your kid's gonna love it. Like if you want to introduce your kids to the Ewoks, just like pop them in front of the TV, turn it on, and say, I'll see you in 97 minutes.
The second movie goes straight into action. Like literally, like within the first 10 minutes, the Ewok village is attacked. Sindel's parents and her brother are dead, and everyone is abducted. It's straight action.
Everybody dies.
It makes no sense, but it's straight action, guys.
Oh, but at least we have Caravan of Courage to get us to straight action. So,
Yeah. Actually, that's the one that I grew up watching. I didn't even watch Caravan of Courage till I got older, and I bought the DVD that had both movies included, because The Battle for Endor was the one that was always on Channel 11. So that's the one I watched.
Also, that is a cooler title between them. Like, saying Battle for Endor sounds like a movie that a Star Wars fan wants to see, as opposed to Caravan of Courage, which is a weird choice of a title. And also, it was only sometimes used as the title. Apparently, I think this got a theatrical release in Europe where they called it Caravan of Courage, but the initial advertising was just Ewok Adventure. So yeah,
you look it up on IMDb, it is actually logged in as an Ewok Adventure. Like you don't actually like it says an Ewok Adventure, and then like underneath it says like Caravan of Courage, like in parentheses. So like, I don't know. It's billed by that name, even though it's called Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure. I don't know.
Yeah. But what I do know is that people should find and follow our guest, Diana, and check out all the things she's doing, since I think we're kind of done with conversation. So Diana, you plugged a little bit at the beginning, but give all the plugs. So where people can find you, what you have projects going on, everything.
Sure. Well, you can always follow me on Instagram at Diana D. Young. That is my married name, or, Facebook, Diana DeGarmo. Still performing as Diana DeGarmo, but, somebody else took my name, so I just had to go with what I got. But anyways, I'm on there to keep in touch with folks and keep people up to date. But, I try to live outside of social media when I can. So that's why, Case, I'm glad we crossed paths when we did, because I'm so happy I came out today. This has been a lot of fun. I loved going down the rabbit hole with you guys. Coming up next, I am doing a virtual production of the show First Date is finally airing. Woohoo! My husband and I actually both, that was the first job we did together since 2020, which was really fun. We got to film it from home. That's going to be airing on Stellar, stellartickets.com, July 23rd through 25th. So if by chance you catch that, it's just 5 performances. And then after that, I'm going to be at Stages of St. Louis playing Patsy Cline and always Patsy Cline. And then after that, who knows where the wind will take me?
Well, it's been so fun watching your career. I'm so glad that we got to work together all those years ago and that we've kept in touch a bit. So thank you again for coming on. Everyone should check out all the stuff you're doing. You're very cool.
Thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it, Sam and Case. You guys are great. And I love your podcast. Keep up the great work. I can't wait to see where you go with Superman.
Well, speaking of podcasts, if people want to check out more Ewok fun, we actually did a mini story on our Scruffy Nerf Herders, our Star Wars D&D game podcast. So if you guys check out episodes 55 and 56, which are Ewok This Way and Ewok on the Wild Side, you can have a little bit of a Star Wars Ewok story that I was the dungeon master for. And spoiler alert, our players leaned into all the sort of funnier, bloodier kind of tropes about Ewoks. So check that out. It was a lot of fun to do. And you can find a bunch of other shows at certainpov.com, including that, such as we referenced, Men of Steel, which is my Superman appreciation podcast. And then we've got tons of great shows. I'm going to give a shout out for Screen Snark on this one. It's a great show with Matt Storm and Rachel Quirky Shank, where they bring guests on to just have a casual conversation about the media that's like in their minds at the time. Like what's going on in the zeitgeist for them? What are they feeling? What's cool? What's caught their attention? And it's a really fun, casual conversation. Check that out. It's also at certainpov.com, which is where, you can find a link to our Discord server. We normally like to do these calls on Discord, but we didn't this time for reasons I can't explain. And it's probably a mistake, but you can come share memes with us and interact. Outside of that, you can find me on Twitter at Ksakin. Sam, where can they find you?
They can find me here and nowhere else because I may still be a figment of Case's imagination. But if you have complaints about anything I said today, especially how I told you that I will die on this hill defending Ewoks, you can find Case at...
Well, you can find Another Pass on Twitter at Another Pass. So that if you have complaints about Sam liking Ewoks or complaints about me liking Ewoks, because fight me. If you want to come after Sam, you're coming after me.
Yeah.
I'll jump in too. Me too.
But check all that out. Come find us. It's been a lot of fun having this conversation, and we have plenty more ahead of us. Well, Sam, take us home.
Next time on Another Pass, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
But I was saying before you got on, Sam, I actually hadn't seen this before, I realized. And I ended up really liking it.
Most people who've seen Ewok films believe that they're watching the second film. And the second film, so the Battle for Endor, actually ended up on everything all of the time. Like that was the one that was played. That one is arguably less good than this one, as a lot of sequels tend to be. That one starts really dark. So it's starring Sindel and Wicket, and they do away with the narrator because at this point, Sindel has spent a lot of time on the planet on Endor with her parents repairing the ship so they can fly away. So Wicket and her have become BFFs, and he's learned English. So he translates for the other Ewoks and stuff like that. But pretty much within the first 7 minutes of the movie, her entire family's killed. And and they're just murdered. Like her dad dies in front of her, her mom dies in front of her, and Mace dies in front of her. And she's kidnapped by the sorceress who, by the way, there's a sorceress in that one. and her henchmen with the other Ewoks, and her and Wicket managed to escape through a little crack in the casing that they were in, and they get out, and then they have to go rescue the other Ewoks and the rest of the planet. So that movie is infinitely worse, but Caravan of Courage is great, and I will die on this hill.
I was thrilled. It started. I was ready to jump on that train. It was so good.
I have notes, but like I'm actually like kind of like I'm
pleasantly
in a good space.
surprised.
Okay, guys, this is basically Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars teddy bears.
Basically, yeah.
Yes.
That's what this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, it is like it's Caravan of Courage instead of Fellowship of the Ring.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's still a caravan. They still pick up people. They still have magically imbued items.
Yeah.
There's a giant fucking spider. It's basically Lord of the Rings.
Right. Oh, and then they have like my favorite addition to the Ewok lore, which is the barbarian Ewok that they get.
Oh, the huntsman.
Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, Chugatuck's like his final stand.
I know.
His final stand, guys. There were tears this time.
No, we'll talk about that too.
Oh, yeah, we're coming back to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have to say that I was like, he gave it all for them. He's going to do his final stand so they can all get away. And honestly, like, it was amazing. Chugatuck's final stand.
Yeah.
This is the moment.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't Screen Beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're a whole Screen Beans now.
She will be mine. Aurora.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.